Thanks very much, Stuart. Thanks everybody for tuning in this morning. I suppose basically what I'm going to go through is, what happens in the milking parlour, and maybe tweaking it a little bit so as maybe, that you can be a little more efficient, maybe, or maybe it's easier to milk the cows, so I suppose that's where I'm coming from this morning. So I suppose, what am I going to outline? The objectives, what are the objectives of a good milking routine? Preparing yourself and preparing the parlour before milking, what's involved, and why it's important, to have it prepared before the cows come into the collecting yard. Then the efficient milking process in the Herringbone parlour, followed by the efficient milking process in the Rotary parlour. Now, Rotary parlours are getting more common in Ireland, and I think we have to tune in there to see, what efficiency levels or key drivers can we look at, to make it more efficient for Rotary parlours. We'll just mention maximum milking time, or MaxT, which is taking off in New Zealand, and we'll just mention that, I suppose, to make you aware of it and what it's about. And I suppose the last thing is we'll look at maybe the washing up. It's a comment that maybe some farmers make to me over the last couple of years, is that they have upgraded their milking parlour, but it's taking a long time to wash up. So maybe just a couple of tips in relation to maybe how to make it a little bit more efficient. So I suppose, the objectives of a good milking routine, or the objectives of smarter milking for me anyway, are, the production of top quality milk, number one. Safety for the milker and for the cow. And I suppose it should be an enjoyable experience for both, particularly the milker, of course. And I suppose the last one is, the efficient use of time spent milking. I've looked at a lot of farmers at this stage, milking, and some of them, are very good, and some of them, I suppose, are not so good. So I suppose it's just to, and for this morning, we're going to focus in on the third point, which is the efficient use of time spent milking. So just quickly moving along, preparation for milking. Again, I would always recommend, having the parlour ready before you go to collect the cows. I think there's nothing worse than having cows hemmed up in a collecting yard and the farmer or the milker getting the parlour ready at that stage. So I think it cuts down stress, and if you have the milking parlour ready before you go for the cows, so it's when the cows hit the milking parlour, you're ready to go. I suppose if you have maybe a bigger herd where two people are involved, it's not such a big issue, because maybe one person goes for the cows and the other person is actually in, the milking parlour getting it ready. So when the cows come in, you're ready to go anyhow, or that person in the milking parlour is ready to go. I suppose the other thing is that, look at the milker. The milker is so important in terms of producing this quality milk. A clean parlour apron or parlour suit, nitrile disposable gloves, and just keep them clean as you go along. I refer to the milker as a conduit between the milking machine and the cows. So they're a key element in the whole milking process in terms of producing quality milk. Row filling, I know Francis is going to cover this in more detail, so I'm not going to spend long at it, but I suppose just to say that, it's so important that, you can get the cows to flow into the parlour. It makes milking so much easier. And I think the milker has a key role to play here in terms of some milkers, the cows seem to flow much better for them than others, so I think it's not to give the cows a habit of maybe for the milker to go out into the collecting yard, to bring in the cows. You really want the cows to flow into the parlour themselves. Preparing the cow, look at, closest have to go on to clean, dry teats. That's a given. Whether it's the summertime or the winter time, closest have to go on to clean, dry teats. Yeah. So I suppose the next thing we move on to is, you might hear the term, preparing in batches. And I suppose I have a schematic here. It's just a small 10-unit parlour. And what I would recommend here is that you divide up the parlour into two sections, so you have the first 5 and the second 5. So I suppose the farmer prepares the first 5 cows, transfers the clusters from, the right-hand side over to the left-hand side, and sprays those 5 cows, when they're finished, when he has transferred the clusters, or when he or she has transferred the clusters across. So you're doing a lot of work in the front part of the parlour. You're being efficient. and then you move back to the second part of the parlour, the second section of the parlour. And again, I suppose I'll go through it, and I think it's the next slide. You know, when you start from the front, work your way back, and spray as you go. When you're, you know, back towards the end of the parlour, maybe 3/4 way back towards the end of the parlour, you can actually open the exit gate, which really saves an awful lot of time in terms of the cows are moving and you're moving as well in terms of efficiency. Bunny hopping, maybe some of you might have heard of it. It's just maybe in bigger parlours where you have 2 people milking. And I suppose it's really key here, you know, that you operate a bunny hopping, you know, to get the efficiency out of the bigger parlours. And I suppose by that I mean, on the right hand side of your screen you have the exit gates, on the left hand side you have the collecting yard, and obviously the milkers are in the pit. So I recommend, you know, starting at the front of the parlour with milker 1. So in other words, milker 1 maybe attaches the first 5 clusters. Milker 2 attaches the next 5 clusters. Then milker 1 attaches the next 5, and so on and so forth. And I suppose, you know, what they're doing is they're spraying as they're going back along as well. So what that enables really is, you know, it enables, you know, getting the clusters on quicker. You know, and I suppose, you know, what you want to happen there is, you know, the cows are actually filtering into the parlour. Once the first 5 or 6 cows are in place, then milker number 1 can actually start attaching clusters. You know, so you're actually, you know, what I would refer to, you're cutting down on that idle time, cluster idle time, which is really important, and that can amount to a fair amount of time, you know, in bigger herds. So I suppose that's the whole bunny hopping thing. I suppose the alternative to that would be that milker 1 concentrates on the first section of the parlour, the first half of the parlour, and milker 2 concentrates on the second section of the parlour. But if you operate the bunny hopping, it's certainly more efficient. Cluster changing, and Caroline will probably refer to this maybe later on, or maybe, you know, repetitive strain injury. You look at, I suppose, what I'm recommending is that, you know, you use both hands when you're attaching clusters. I suppose the average cluster in Ireland currently is about, you know, it ranges between, you know, 2 and 3 kgs. You know, so if you're lifting all that weight with one hand, you know, as opposed to 2 hands, you know, I would certainly recommend if you can use both hands, you know, depending on which side of the parlour you're working on. So just quickly, on the right hand side of the parlour, and I suppose how do you determine which is the right and which is the left? Always have your back to the collecting yard. You're looking forward. You're looking, you know, in the same direction as the cows, or the exit gate. So the right hand side of the parlour, when you're attaching clusters to the right hand side of the parlour, you're holding the cluster with your left hand. You're holding the cluster with your left hand when you're attaching clusters to the right hand side of the parlour. However, when you're attaching clusters on the left-hand row, or the left-hand side of the parlour, you're holding the cluster with the right hand. So you're distributing that load between both hands. And I suppose, you know, as herds have got bigger, you know, this has become more of an issue with farmers, really. You know, that they're actually, you know, that there is more of this repetitive strain injury. Just quickly, teat disinfection, it's really so important, you know, to produce quality milk and to reduce that mastitis levels in your herd. Again, you know, whether you spray or dip, so long as it's done correctly, that's the key. So when you're spraying, you're talking about 15 mils per cow per milking. If you're dipping, you're talking about 10 mils per cow per milking. I suppose just maybe, you know, to put it all together then, you know, what are the key drivers of efficiency in a herringbone parlour? We're talking about, you know, starting from the front of the parlour first of all. So when the first cows are in place, you know, you start working on those. Start attaching clusters once the first couple of cows are in place. Work in batches, and we went through that, and teat spray as you go. This will enable you to open the gate then when you're 3/4 way down the pit, so as the cows are actually walking out and you're working as well. I suppose in bigger parlours, you know, to practice bunny hopping with 2 milkers. I suppose, yeah, the other thing is efficient use of the backing gate. And again, the backing gate should be used, you know, to reduce the space in the yard, not to force the cows into the parlour. That's really, really important. I've seen, you know, in some cases the backing gate is not used properly. So it's really important, you know, if you're training milkers, you know, that the backing gate is used properly and it's used to reduce the space in the yard as opposed to, you know, force the cows in. And again, opening the exit gate early, that's one of the key factors I see in efficient milking. You know, that when you start at the front of the parlour, you work your way down, you're spraying, opening the exit gate, the cows are filtering out of the parlour, and you're working away also. I suppose just, you know, a number of key drivers in a rotary parlour. I suppose generally speaking, you're talking about bigger numbers of units. So one of the key aspects here, I think, is actually getting those clusters on fairly quickly. And we're talking about, you know, a target of maybe getting clusters on in 4 seconds. I suppose operating the platform at an efficient speed, you know, so look, that will depend on the operator as to, you know, how efficient they are as well. You know, standing close to the bridge. Now, by that I mean is, you know, where the cows enter the rotary parlour, you know, if you see the operator close to that bridge all the time, it means that they're getting the clusters on fairly efficiently, fairly quickly, and it enables the cows, it enables, you know, the clusters to be on the cows quicker, so as they'll make out quicker as well. I suppose keeping the platform moving, and that's something I've seen in some rotaries. You know, if there's a stop-start there, it does disrupt the cows or the cow flow coming into the parlour. You know, so keeping that platform moving is important. Even maybe if you skip a bale, you know, that the cow doesn't go into a bale. If you can keep the platform moving, it is important. Again, efficient use of the back gate, and I suppose with some rotaries, what happens is, when if let's say you have a 54 point rotary parlour, once a revolution goes around, the backing gate automatically moves in and takes a space of 50 or 54 cows, which is I think it's very good. Again, I suppose it's just not as easy, you know, to swap hands when you're working in a rotary, and I suppose it depends on, you know, is the rotary going clockwise or anti-clockwise, but still, you know, you can do it in terms of, if you can swap between what we call round the circle and applying 2 teats at a time when you're applying clusters, you know, to avoid the repetitive strainage. You know, we'd want to be in a parlour really, or, you know, to explain that fully, but yes, it can be done, and it's something we might need to look at maybe a little bit more. Maximum milking time, MaxT. Look at I'm just making you aware of this. Again, it's gaining ground in New Zealand. I suppose what I would say about MaxT is that you need to get all the other elements in place first before you'd actually contemplate or consider going down the MaxT route. But it's just to make maybe farmers aware that it's out there and that it's working well, certainly in New Zealand. So MaxT is a system where cows are milked to a predetermined point. And by that I mean is, I suppose that's done by actually adjusting the ACRs. So instead of maybe taking the clusters off it at 0.2 kgs per minute, you know, you're increasing that a little bit. I suppose it's determined by working out. There's a template there. There's a formula to work this out. So this is determined by working out when 80% of the cows are milked, you know, that the clusters can come off. So that means that clusters are remaining. Clusters from the remaining 20% are taken off, even if unfinished. Now, in the majority of cases, like, there isn't any negative impact on other health, and there's a lot of studies, you know, done internationally that would show that. However, you know, I would say that I wouldn't be recommending this on a herd with a high SCC. And I suppose there may be some cows that it doesn't suit, you know what I mean? And when some farmers say to me, you know, oh, look, I have slow cows, what do I do with slow cows? I suppose I would always reply by saying is, don't let the slow cow dictate your milking routine. Okay, you have to deal with her. Yes, you have to deal with her, but don't let her actually dictate, you know, your whole milking routine. Washing up after milking. Look, it's a comment that farmers make to me on an ongoing basis, that they have maybe upgraded the parlour or they have built a new parlour, and they say, God, it takes a long time to wash it down. You know what I mean? So I suppose I just put a couple of points together here in relation to maybe look at helping farmers or helping milkers maybe to make it a little bit quicker to wash down. I suppose the first one is, you know, wash down clusters using an exfoliation glove. I came across this. There was a farmer doing this a couple of years ago, and I thought it was a great idea. And it certainly, you know, you can see an image there on the right hand side of one of these gloves, and it goes on over your nitrile disposable glove, and it certainly, you know, makes washing those clusters a little bit easier. The other thing is, you know, if you have using a a high pressure power hose with the lance cut off the top of it if we're washing clusters, and I've seen that in a few farms, and that's working quite well as well. I suppose the other thing is that, you need to use a high volume, low pressure wash, for the cow stand areas. And again, I think if you have the slot drainage system on the cow stand area, it makes it much easier to clean, because you're not washing all of the dirt along the whole cow stand area, if you get my meaning. I suppose I would also suggest maybe periodic washing with a high pressure power hose will keep the parlour clean. We have to remember we're producing a food. It's a food factory that we're talking about here, so keeping it clean is really key. Look at just the second last slide. Benefits of a good milking routine. Consistent production of top quality milk. That's one of the key areas. Increased parlour efficiency. Consistent milking, so as the cows are milked in the same way all the time. Hopefully, reduced repetitive strain injury by maybe implementing some of the points that I have outlined already. You have less mastitis and lower SCC, hopefully. And look at all of this, should turn out to be more profitable as well.